After conquering the charts in England, the Beatles finally took their sound to America, the very place they dreamed of succeeding. And for Paul McCartney, it felt like destiny fulfilled. He's written more timeless songs than most artists could ever. Imagine shaping the sound of a generation and creating melodies that will live long after we're gone. But beneath that cheerful smile, Paul McCartney has carried secrets for over 60 years. Secrets he never wanted to say out loud. I used to love my dad's piano playing. I think that's where my love of music really began. But there were some songs, the ones I wish I hadn't written, for decades. Paul has been the diplomat, always smiling in interviews, praising every Beatles album, carefully guarding the band's legacy, but privately, he's kept a list, a quiet reminder of the songs he wishes he could erase, the ones that didn't turn out the way he hoped. 5 songs that still haunt him. 5 moments when even the Beatles' greatest songwriter second-guessed himself. 5 tracks that made him cringe, even as the rest of the world sang along. These aren't obscure B-sides or forgotten experiments. They're hits, songs that charted, songs fans adore, yet Paul McCartney can't stand them. Some were pushed through against the rest of the band's wishes. Others slipped by his own judgment. A few sold millions, while betraying everything he believed in. And one, his most famous creation, still breaks his heart every time he hears it. This isn't about false modesty. It's about an artist finally admitting what went wrong. These are the 5 Beatles songs Paul McCartney wishes he could erase. 5. Maxwell's Silverhammer. Some songs are charming. This one was a mistake disguised as whimsy. Maxwell's Silver Hammer was Paul's attempt at playful storytelling, a darkly comic tune about a serial killer with a hammer. He thought it was clever, even funny, something that would make people smile. But everyone else in the studio knew the truth. It was unbearable, and Paul was the only one who couldn't see it. The song was recorded during the Abbey Road sessions in 1969, when the band was already falling apart. John wanted something raw and real. George was frustrated at being treated like a sideman. Ringo just wanted peace, and Paul? He wanted to perfect this bizarre little novelty song. He spent days obsessing over every detail. He even dragged a real anvil into Abbey Road to get the perfect bang-bang sound. Take after take, hammer hitting metal, while the others sat in silent frustration. George Martin, their legendary producer, gently tried to move things along. John Lennon wasn't so gentle. He openly mocked it, calling it Paul's granny music. Paul later admitted, "They all hated it, and I kept pushing. I thought I knew best." When Abbey Road was released, Maxwell's Silver Hammer sat awkwardly between masterpieces like Something in Here Comes the Sun, and now, every time Paul revisits the album, he skips it, because he finally hears what they all heard. It isn't that the song is technically bad, the melody is catchy, the production clean, but it's hollow, a gimmick pretending to be clever. A joke no one laughed at but the man telling it. Maxwell's Silver Hammer taught Paul a brutal lesson, that sometimes being right isn't the same as being good. 4. Wild Honey Pie. Not every experiment deserves to see the light of day. Wild Honey Pie wasn't meant to be a song. It was just Paul fooling around in the studio for 30 seconds. Looping his voice and guitar into something that sounded more like a sound effect than music. He recorded it as a joke, a moment of silliness between serious takes, but somehow it ended up on the White Album. The sessions for that album were chaotic. The band had just returned from India, each member writing on their own. They decided that every idea, no matter how strange, would make the record. No filters, no arguments, just pure freedom. It sounded noble in theory. In reality, it meant half-finished experiments became permanent history. Paul later said, "I was just messing about. Someone should have stopped me." The song, if you can even call it that, is Paul repeating honey pie again and again with odd guitar sounds layered on top. It's less than a minute long with no verse, no chorus, no point. It's the musical equivalent of a doodle that somehow got framed and hung in a museum. What bothers Paul isn't that he recorded it. All artists experiment. What bothers him is that no one stopped him from releasing it. With George Martin's control slipping during those sessions, the band's democracy turned into chaos. And Wild Honey Pie slipped through. For years, fans have tried to defend it, calling it avant-garde, experimental, even genius. But Paul has been honest, it's not deep. It's just silly. It's a lesson in restraint, proof that knowing what to leave out is just as important as knowing what to put in. 3 Obla di Obla da. Commercial success doesn't always mean artistic satisfaction. Obla di Obla da became a massive hit. It topped charts, sold millions, and became one of the Beatles' most recognizable songs. And Paul McCartney hates every cheerful second of it, not because it failed, but because it succeeded for all the wrong reasons. The song was Paul's attempt at a ska-inspired pop tune, based on a phrase a Nigerian friend used. On paper, it sounded harmless, a light-hearted story about Desmond and Molly living a happy life. But in the studio, it became a nightmare. Paul demanded endless takes, searching for a magic feeling that never came. John Lennon hated it immediately, calling it, once again, granny music. George thought it was tedious. Even Ringo, the eternal peacekeeper, was losing patience. "We must have recorded it 100 times," Paul recalled, and John's face just got darker and darker. When it finally became a hit, it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like confirmation that John had been right. That Paul was chasing popularity instead of art. "I was trying too hard to be catchy," Paul later said. "Oh, I forgot to make it meaningful." Obla di Obla da is the sound of a man trying to please everyone and losing himself in the process. 2 Hello, Goodbye. Sometimes the simplest songs reveal the emptiest ideas. Released in November 1967, Hello, Goodbye came at a difficult time. Brian Epstein had just died. The Beatles needed a hit. So Paul sat down and wrote one in a single afternoon, opposites strung together like a children's rhyme. Hello, goodbye. Yes, no. Why, I don't know. It was pure formula, and it went straight to number 1. But Paul knew, even as he wrote it, that it was hollow. He wasn't creating, he was producing. John Lennon saw it instantly, calling it another safe Paul song written for radio, not for the soul. George barely participated. The band performed the video in colorful costumes, pretending to have fun, but their faces told a different story. They looked tired, detached, like men playing the roles of the Beatles rather than being them. Years later, Paul admitted, "We needed a single, and I gave them what they wanted." But that's what hurts him most. He gave them what they wanted, not what they needed. Hello, Goodbye became a hit. But for Paul, it marked the moment he stopped taking risks, the moment success became safer than sincerity. And that's a wound that never fully healed. One had Let It Be, his most famous song, his biggest regret. Let It Be was supposed to be Paul McCartney's crowning moment, a beautiful gospel-inspired ballad written about his mother, who appeared to him in a dream when the band was falling apart. Originally, it was perfect, just Paul and his piano, raw and heartfelt. But that's not the version the world knows. When producer Phil Spector took control, he buried Paul's simplicity under choirs, strings, and layers of production. "I heard what he did and I felt sick," Paul admitted. He fought to stop the release. But by then, the Beatles were collapsing. John sided with Spector, George didn't care, and Ringo just wanted peace. So Paul watched helplessly as his intimate prayer became someone else's spectacle. The cruel irony. He wrote Let It Be as a song of hope, but it became a song of loss, forever tied to the Beatles' breakup. Every time someone tells him it's their favorite Beatles song, he smiles and says, "Thank you." But inside, he's hearing the version the world never got to hear, the one that truly meant something to him. In 2021, with the Let It Be reissue, he finally restored his original vision, stripped of the orchestral clutter. But it was too late. The overproduced version is the one people remember. Let It Be taught Paul the harshest lesson of all, that even your most honest creation can be taken from you. That success doesn't always equal satisfaction. That sometimes your greatest hit becomes your greatest heartbreak.
Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon.